Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday, and welcome to the fourth episode of Woke Roundup, my weekly exclusive show that I do exclusively on Rokfin, where I cover a whole bunch of woke stories that I just haven't gotten to in the past week in one way or another, but that are still important for us to consider as we keep on top of the woke trends. And I have to tell you guys, so I've been having a little fun this weekend. My husband's out of town, and so I'm kind of left to my own devices, and I decided to buy some art. Now, I love art. I have been going to galleries for years. I spend more money than I reasonably should on art. And you know, when I'm buying art, I try to hone in on things that just, they hit me with that kind of emotional, visceral reaction. I don't think of art as like an investment. I don't think about how things are going to appreciate. I don't think about how exclusive the artist is or any of those things. Because the fact of the matter is that like most originals are like out of my price range anyway. But every once in a while, I'm able to just buy pieces that I really, really love, that I look forward to hanging, and that really just hit me on that emotional level where I see it and I'm like, I have to own it. It's awesome. You know, I grew up in a time when I did music a lot growing up, and it was really hard to do it because no one wanted to support the arts where I grew up. And so as an adult, now that I have my own money and I can spend it any way I want, I do try to make it a priority to support the arts in the ways that make sense for me. And I think that everyone should. Art, music, all of these things, it brings love into our lives. And I know that sometimes you guys are like, Carlin, we are logical, we are not emotional. But listen, guys, emotions drive us. Emotions is why we are who we are. Up here, we make decisions on a very emotional level. And the reason I bring this up is I wanted to show you guys just this piece that I just bought today. Because for me, this is the attitude that you have to have when you are fending off the woke. I'm going to hang this in my office. I'm very excited about this one. This one is actually a unique piece of art, so I'm actually really, really pumped that I got it. This is by a pop artist named Romero Brito, who is, I mean, he's prolific. He is all over the place. You will see his work everywhere. Once you start learning how to identify his work, you will literally see his work everywhere. He's about to have a movie made about him, all this stuff. But I bought this piece because I was looking at it and it reminded me of the woman that I want to be on a daily basis. I love that her hair is blowing in the wind. I love that she's got that peaceful, calm, serene look over her face. And to me, this right here is the very, 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 very definition of what it means to be unfuckwithable. Yes, I said it. Unfuckwithable is the thing that I try to be every single day, the thing that I think that everyone who is fighting off this woke nonsense needs to try to integrate into their lives. It is actually a real word. I looked it up on Urban Dictionary just to be sure. Here is what it means. When you're truly at peace and in touch with yourself, and nothing anyone says or does bothers you, and no negativity or drama can touch you. This painting right here, it's actually a mixed media piece. This piece is unfuckwithable. She could have everything going on around her. She could have people running around calling her a racist, all this stuff. She's perfectly at peace with who she is, and she's got these hearts around her for love, 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 because as long as we are coming from a place of love, it makes it a lot easier to fight the woke nonsense and to not go a little crazy in the process. So I wanted to show you guys that piece. I'm very, very, very excited about getting it in my house. I cannot wait to see it in person. Of course, like I do a lot of this stuff online now because I can't just go out to an art gallery because a lot of them are closed. But fortunately, a lot of art galleries have come online and are still selling beautiful works like this that can inspire us to be the types of people that we want to be. So let's move into our first story of the week. Now, I'm going to bring you back. We're going to go on a journey back to last week. In last week's episode, I showed you a whole series of articles basically depicting Asians as this oppressed minority class that just can't get out ahead of all the racism that's going on around them. And I asked one simple question. I was like, I don't really even want to comment on the absurdity of these articles, but the question I had is why all of a sudden we're starting to see a rash of articles about how Asians are oppressed. And what I said last week was that I bet Asians are like the most confused race there's all variety of different ethnicities within the title of Asian. You guys know what I mean. But I bet that Asians are actually the most confused when it comes to this woke nonsense, because the fact of the matter is, like, on one day they might be oppressed, on another day they might actually be considered to be white. So one of the things that we actually talk about a lot in my locals community, I have quite a few Asian members of my locals, and we talk about how, you guys aren't oppressed. You've assimilated to whiteness. It's like an ongoing joke, because in a lot of school districts, they do actually treat Asians the same as they treat white students. They classify them literally in the same category because Asians break the mold for what the woke expect of any non-white people. They tend to overachieve academically. Colleges and universities will actually discriminate against Asians in their college admissions process because they do so good. They're hardworking families. They get that work ethic passed down from generation to generation. And so they break the mold for what a lot of these woke critical theorists expect out of minority communities. So some days Asians are oppressed, and then some days Asians are oppressors, just depending on what's going on that week. But my question last week is, why all of a sudden is there a rash of articles about how Asians are oppressed and put upon and all this stuff? Well, we got our answer. This week, we got our answer in this opinion in Newsweek. Asian Americans emerging as a strong voice against critical race theory. Okay, so now we can see what the media is doing. We can see that it's because Asians are starting to fight back against this critical theory nonsense, they all of a sudden have to come up with a slew of articles in order to convince Asians that they are oppressed. Let's read this opinion piece from Newsweek. Critical race theory is a divisive, discriminatory ideology that judges people on the basis of their skin color. It has perpetuated our society. It's in federal agencies and federal contractors' bias training in school curriculum and many corporations' diversity training. Few are willing to speak out against it for fear of being labeled racist or white supremacist. Asian Americans, however, have emerged as a powerful voice against this pernicious ideology. And this is very true. Listen, earlier this week on my channel, I had a conversation with Lily Tang Williams, who is an activist that actually lives not too far away from me in New Hampshire. And she is amazing because she grew up during the Cultural Revolution in China. And we had a great discussion about how what's going on in the United States right now mirrors what she experienced in the Cultural Revolution in China. And she is very actively fighting back against all this woke nonsense because she came here to escape it. She came to America specifically to get away with what she was experiencing growing up in China. And now it's freaking her out that she's seeing the same thing happen again. And she's not the only one that comes from that type of background that's experiencing that. The Chinese American Citizens Alliance of Greater New York delivered the most vigorous rejection of CRT yet, calling it a hateful, divisive, manipulative fraud. CACAGNY is one of the oldest chapters of Chinese American Citizens Alliance, which was founded in San Francisco in 1895 to respond to nationwide discrimination and violence against Chinese Americans. For more than a century, this organization has helped Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, to quicken the spirit of American patriotism and to ensure the legal rights of its members. CACAGNY speaks out against CRT now because Asian Americans have experienced its harm firsthand. According to CRT's victimization ledger, all whites are oppressors and all people of color are oppressed. Now, when they say victimization ledger, what they essentially mean is there is a hierarchy of victimization within critical race theory. And, just to be quite blunt about it, the darker your skin color, the higher you tend to be on the hierarchy. So Black Americans with dark skin are at the very top. They actually outrank in the CRT hierarchy Black Americans with lighter skin. The darker you are, the more oppressed you are, according to this ideology, which is like overtly racist, but this is what they're doing. So Black Americans tend to be at the top. If you're a Black trans person, you are like, woof, you are like off the charts, like way, 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 way up high. Then, what I've seen lately is that Native Americans tend to be second, and then we have Latinos, and then Asians and Jews are like way down at the bottom. And if you're like Irish and Italian, forget about it. You have assimilated to whiteness so far as the woke are concerned. But there is that hierarchy that exists, and like I said, Asians kind of move up and down depending on, frankly, whatever their mood is at any given time. CRT argues that unequal economic outcomes among different races in our society result from white power and white privilege. Asian Americans punch a big hole in that window. As a group, their economic achievement has surpassed that of all other racial groups, including whites. Last year's Department of Labor statistics even showed that the median weekly earnings of Asian women surpassed white men's earnings. And this is why there are now all these articles trying to convince Asians that they are oppressed, because they actually outperform. They break this entire model of the idea that if you are not white, you cannot succeed in America. They break it, and so they finally have to come out and try to convince them that they are oppressed over and over and over again. And they're doing it still this week. We're going to look at a few more articles in a minute. Values drive Asian Americans' economic success. Many believe educational attainment, stable marriages, delayed gratification, hard work, and meritocracy. CRT attacks all those as white values, and the people who practice them as acting white. You know, I had a conversation with King Randall on my channel this past week, and you should go watch that one too. You should watch the one with Lily Tang Williams, and you should watch the one with King Randall. And King Randall is Black. He's not Asian. He is Black. And he actually works with a group of young, almost entirely Black men. They're not all Black, but most of them are, because that's just the demographic where he lives. And one of the pictures I showed during our conversation was he had all his young men dressed up in matching suits, and they were looking sharp, and they were getting their picture taken. And that's one of the things he does to help them like have more pride, to feel good about who they are, is to dress up in a nice suit. And he was telling me that when he did that, he was accused of white supremacy for making them dress white because they put on a nice suit to feel good about themselves. And this is what it means when they say acting white. It's absolutely absurd and frankly extremely racist that things like stable marriages, going to school, working hard, these are considered white values. That is incredibly racist and condescending to anyone who's not white, that believes in working hard, that believes in maintaining the family, that believes in, putting their nose to the grindstone and showing up every day. It's an incredibly racist idea that only white people are capable of that, and that white people use that to try to keep everyone that's non-white down. It's absurd. Because Asian Americans' economic achievement and educational attainment resist CRT narratives, irritated activists have tried to eject Asian Americans from the people of color category. Last November, the North Thurston Public School District in Washington State released an equity report in which it grouped white and Asian American students together while placing everyone else in the students of color category. I told you, school systems are starting to actually classify Asians as white for the purpose of these little categorizations, because Asians are overachieving and they don't like that it breaks the narrative. The school district only apologized after an outcry from the community's Asian American families. Even as victims of hate crimes, Asian Americans discredit CRT's assertion that racial prejudice only goes one way, from white people to people of color. This year has seen a rising number of hate crimes against Asian Americans, especially in some of the most progressive cities in the United States. In San Francisco, an 84-year-old Thai immigrant died last month after being violently kicked to the ground during his morning stroll. In Oakland's Chinatown, 28-year-old Yawa Muslim aggressively shoved a 91-year-old Asian man to the pavement from behind and attacked two other Asian seniors. Also in Oakland, in broad daylight, two young men attacked a 71-year-old Asian woman by knocking her to the ground before yanking her purse so hard the straps break off. In New York City, a young man used a box cutter knife to slash Noel Quintana's face on a New York subway during the morning commute. Quintana, a 61-year-old Filipino immigrant, was rushed to the hospital where he received 100 stitches. CRT activists blame white nationalism for these hate crimes against Asian Americans. However, all the perpetrators in these cases were non-Asian minorities. Asian Americans are concerned that CRT activists intentionally ignoring this inconvenient truth may result in the government misallocating resources and failing to protect Asian American communities from hate crimes. Asian Americans have felt more harm from CRT in education. Activists claim that teaching math and science perpetuates white privilege. They're more interested in indoctrinating kids with identity politics, intersectionality, and race struggles. In an elementary school in Cupertino, California, where 94% of students are non-white, a math teacher told third graders, in a math class that they live in a white-dominated culture and had them rank themselves according to their power and privilege on an identity map. Chinese parents organized a protest demanding the school stop teaching racism to their children and start teaching actual math instead. What a concept. You know the Asians are especially pissed off by this because, they're the ones that are going to make their kids sit down at the kitchen table and they're going to have to teach them the math that their high schools aren't teaching them, or in this case, their elementary schools are not teaching them. I'm sorry. If I had a kid, I would already be confused enough by this new math box crap that's going on. I would have no idea. I would be teaching my kid the old way of doing math, in which they didn't have to draw boxes and all sorts of caricatures every time they want to do addition and subtraction. That's confusing enough. And now in math class, you have third graders ranking themselves in order of their power and privilege. In math class. I bet the Asians are pissed at this. I would be pissed at this too. One Chinese parent explained that CRT's emphasis on dividing society into oppressors and oppressed based on skin color reminded them of the bloody class struggle in Mao's Cultural Revolution. And that is exactly what Lily Tang Williams said on my channel just earlier this week. Asian parents are also alarmed about attempts to change admission standards for colleges and top high schools at the expense of Asian American children. CRT activists have been pushing for lowering admission standards or the complete removal of difficult entrance exams to top high schools because too many Asians are in good schools and Asians are so overrepresented that those schools are not diverse. Can you imagine crowning yourself as the advocate for the oppressed, and then saying to a school, oh, no, you have too many Asians, you're just not diverse. Dude, that's racist. What are you doing? These were the arguments New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio used to eliminate the specialized high schools admissions test. He wanted to replace it with a new admissions process based on race so that student bodies of New York's elite public schools would mirror the city's overall population composition and not be dominated by Asian kids. CACAGNY, along with Asian American families and other allies, fiercely protested the mayor's proposal. The mayor recanted after his failed presidential bid. However, CRT activists found success in other places. Last year, the Fairfax County Public Health Board in Virginia canceled the entrance exam for Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. Last month, the San Francisco Unified School District voted to eliminate the merit-based admissions process to Lowell High School, one of the city's top high schools. The school board claimed such admissions process perpetuated the culture of white supremacy and racial abuse towards Black and Latinx students, even though the students of color make up 75% of Lowell's student body and more than half of them are Asian. Asian parents worry that eliminating merit-based admissions will result in fewer admissions for qualified Asian students. Let me see. Hang on. In Washington and California, CRT activists tried to restore affirmative action in employment and college admissions. One of the arguments was that Asian Americans were overrepresented in universities. Efforts in both states were defeated at the ballot box, mostly due to opposition by Asian Americans who were concerned Asian students would be unfairly penalized in college admissions. Many Asian Americans believed education is the way to achieve upward mobility and the American dream. They see any attempt to limit their children's access to quality education as unjust exclusion. That's why CACAGNY calls CRT today's Chinese Exclusion Act and the real hate crimes against Asians. It is an increasingly intolerant environment. Calling out CRT takes tremendous courage. Those willing to speak up may face economic and reputational consequences. Asian Americans have have spoken fearlessly and taken the lead to expose CRT's divisive and destructive nature. The rest of us should follow their example and join the efforts to stop this harmful ideology from tearing apart our society. I think this is a great opinion piece. I think Helen is absolutely dead on, and I think this is why we're continuing to see crap like this. For week 2 in a row, there are a massive amount of articles about how Asian Americans are oppressed. Dude, I have alerts set up on so many different keywords, and I cannot tell you. My email goes off all day long with different alerts based on different keywords like anti-racism, stuff like that. And the trend I have seen in the last 2 weeks is that the vast majority of the articles are focused on convincing Asian Americans that they are oppressed because they're starting to fight back. Because there are people like Lily Tang Williams who are saying, I grew up during Mao's Cultural Revolution and I'm not down with this. This is exactly what happened in China, which is why I left.